But I found that I was able to keep up with the courses, take exams for 3 of the courses that I took throughout the year here, and it just seemed like a privilege to be able to do coursework alongside these other 2 opportunities.
The US Fulbright Student Program in Austria has a number of different grant types to choose from, each of which offers students a unique way to engage with their disciplines and projects. To help you determine which grant type is the best for you, we sat down with the 2023-24 US Fulbright students to learn about each grant type from the recipients themselves.
In this interview, we discussed the community-based combined grant with Molly Sauter, who received this grant to pursue her community service project, teach English, and study in Vienna.
So when I was first considering Fulbright as an option for me after undergrad, I kind of faced a decision that I think a lot of intended Fulbright applicants face of deciding whether to do an ETA or research depending on their interests. I considered the ETA for a little bit because I was really interested in teaching and I really value how you can develop your communication skills through teaching. But I knew that since I don't really want to be a teacher and I don't exactly want to work in the education sector, it wasn't exactly what I wanted for this year for me. Then conversely, research, I had done previously hard science research in my undergrad, and I kind of still see research as a possible career for me. But since I'm interested in the public health sector, and I know that nothing really in healthcare works without cooperation between policymakers, nonprofits, other social activist groups alongside the research, I knew that I kind of wanted to have a different experience this year outside of research. And then luckily I came across Fulbright Austria's page and read about the community-based combined grant, and almost immediately after I read the description, I knew that that was going to be the grant that I would apply for, and I wasn't looking back at any other ones. Knowing that I wanted to find something within the healthcare sector, I eventually found my affiliate, Aidshilfe Wien, who works towards ending the discrimination and stigmatization of people living with HIV in Vienna and in broader Austria, as well as reducing the spread of STDs through education and different preventative initiatives. And so once I was talking with them, I met with them over the phone. We kind of planned out how this grant year might look like. That gives me such a unique opportunity to not only get involved in the nonprofit sector, but also by teaching, I can see kind of how education has a huge impact on healthcare as well. And that kind of unique opportunity to combine teaching English and this healthcare nonprofit work is just something that I couldn't turn down. So with the many elements of the grant, the teaching is the priority. And so it is 13 hours of in-classroom work. It comes out to about 20 hours for me in terms of lesson planning and other sorts of responsibilities and being at the school. So alongside that, you do have, for me, I had my nonprofit work, which both included some hours that were supposed to be between the 9 to 5 workday to do your typical internship work, but also some volunteer opportunities like running info stands or working at the clinic that typically happened outside of 9 to 5 hours. And so how this kind of worked out for me, balancing the fact that there was some work I needed to do at the same time as the school day, was kind of being really clear and communicative with my teachers right when I arrived. In my first introduction to my email to my mentor teachers, I told them, hey, I have these other responsibilities going on because I'm a combined grantee. And I was really lucky that my teachers were really supportive of my other responsibilities. And a lot of them were actually very excited that I worked at Aidshilfe because a lot of my schools, both of my schools had relationships with Aidshilfe in terms of doing youth outreach programs. So that sort of support made it super, super easy to then make a schedule that allowed me a day off each week where I could dedicate just to Aidshilfe, and also allowed me to kind of negotiate my hours to keep them in the morning so then I can have the afternoons free, both for Aidshilfe and for the university coursework. And regarding the university coursework, that one can seem a little daunting on top of the other opportunities, but you only have to take one course a semester, and if you take more than one course a semester, you don't actually have to take the exams for those courses. And so I found this to be a really neat way where I actually just chose some courses that worked within the schedule, but were courses that I was genuinely interested in, and that made it so much easier to be engaged in. And admittedly, I might not have made it in person to the courses all the time because sometimes they did end up falling in between my other responsibilities. But I found that I was able to keep up with the courses, take exams for 3 of the courses that I took throughout the year here, and it just seemed like a privilege to be able to do coursework alongside these other two opportunities. Of course, there's unexpected challenges regarding sort of the social changes moving to a different country. Some people will say that the Viennese are, I'll say, reserved to be nice. And that's definitely true, but those were kind of like social changes or the cultural changes that I expected. What I didn't really expect kind of came up more within my teaching and my work at AIDS Hilfa. In teaching, I was really surprised by the use of ChatGPT and those sorts of discussions, students losing the ability to focus within a classroom, hearing that those conversations from back home and actually kind of seeing them in person in a classroom, even in a different country, was very unexpected and definitely did pose a challenge as a teacher, trying to get students engaged and actually interested in your lessons. And in terms of AIDS Hilfa, I was also kind of faced some unexpected challenges working within the healthcare system here. There is universal healthcare, public healthcare, and yet that doesn't mean that all challenges faced, especially in preventing STDs, goes away. You kind of face other challenges in terms of still continued and persistent discrimination against people with HIV, or discrimination against people in the LGBTQ community, taboos against talking about sexual health, especially in the classroom. And so those kind of unexpected challenges were definitely surprising in my work, but were also some of the most insightful challenges that I faced. So through my grant-related activities, I really have a unique opportunity to act as a cultural ambassador, both directly in the classroom. Often I was asked to kind of give lessons on the American aspect of whatever topic they're talking about at the time, even if it's things like tourism and giving sort of American tourist tips versus things like climate change and having to discuss America's view on climate change and how that's impacting politics. And I think I was always really surprised by how engaged the students actually were when it came to these topics that were, just about America. Is that I always felt like I was talking about America in the classroom, and yet the students seemed to really find it interesting and engaging to the point where I was asked a lot of additional questions in the hallway. And I think that sort of informal discussion also brought up a lot of very interesting topics. And in my AIDS Hilfa work, of course, also another incredible opportunity to kind of discuss and really dive into these differences between the American healthcare system based on my experiences working within the healthcare system or doing research back home versus what I was seeing now, and talking with people who have grown up in Austria and their experiences within the healthcare system, especially as it relates to getting access to STD testing or STD treatment. And so those kinds of directly related to my grant proposal have been very interesting in terms of these direct routes to actually produce cultural exchange and discuss my American perspective. But it was also very interesting how many informal discussions I had outside of my grant-related activities, just walking around day to day, people that I met through different social activities, or even strangers that I met once they realized I was American would sometimes ask me about American politics. And so those sorts of day-to-day discussions were also felt very important to kind of put on an idea of that an American might be different from what they often see on social media these days. My most memorable culture shock, I think, is actually a positive one. I mean, of course, there's all the culture shocks about the stores being closed on Sundays or in the evenings, but I think something that's really continues to surprise me since I've been here, and is something that I really hope to find a way to manifest when I'm back in the US, is the huge sense of community that exists within Vienna in particular and in broader Austria because of how accessible things like hobbies or just experiencing nature, getting out into the green space, how accessible those things all are, both financially. There's dance classes, sports classes, orchestra choirs that you can all join for free, if not for very cheap, as well as just public transit that within 45 minutes you can be out wandering the hills of Vienna, hiking through wineries. And the fact that when you do all of these activities, you're seeing so many Austrians doing them as well. And this sort of work-life balance is so important to Austrians that really adds into the sense of community that you can feel, even as an American, even as only living here for 9 months. It's been really impressive to me how that sense of community can really make a difference in one's daily life. I mean, I've had so many life lessons from living in a new country, so many professional and personal developments, working in schools and working with AIDS Hilfa and even taking my coursework. I've learned so much. But I think one of the biggest takeaways I've had this year is just how powerful kind of one-on-one, day-to-day conversations can be in terms of learning about people, but also making small changes as you go. I could see in my students, some of them at the beginning of the year, how kind of unengaged they might have been in certain topics that I was talking about. But if I kind of kept bringing them up or kept really encouraging them, even in a one-on-one or maybe a classroom setting, to kind of think differently about, sort of things that they were used to. By the end of the school year, I saw some students who were actually like really engaged or seeking me out in the hallway to kind of ask more questions about topics that they might be interested in. And so knowing that all that kind of sparks from just like one-on-one conversations, particularly when they're in a cultural exchange, but even if it's just one-on-one conversations with somebody you've known for a long time, but about a new topic, how kind of impactful those can be. For future applicants, I think one of the biggest pieces of advice based on my own experience, but also more so based on the experience of some people in my cohort, is that when you arrive in Austria, you should be ready for things to change from what you proposed in your grant. I think especially when you consider the community-based projects, you are writing the grant proposal a year before you are actually arriving in Austria. And with community-based projects, nonprofits, a year is a long time in terms of what sort of projects might continue, what sort of work you might actually be able to do, even the people who might be working there. So when you arrive in Austria, it might be that your supervisor will be a different person at the organization. It might be that the main project that you were planning to or excited to work on might have already passed or might be finished or might not be viable anymore. And that can be, I think, frustrating for a lot of people when they first arrive. And I know a lot of people in my cohort experienced disruptions like this. And it can be really daunting when you first arrive, you're in a new culture, and all of a sudden everything you had planned is changing. So I think my advice is that you just have to be flexible. It's not something that you can avoid. It's not something that you can really control always. You are moving to a new country. You're working for, possibly 2 new schools, 1 new nonprofit, taking coursework. There's going to be a lot of change really quickly. And so just being kind of open to new experiences and know that no matter what you end up doing for your community-based project, it's probably still going to be incredible and effective and very impactful work for the community that you'll be in Austria.